Hey Jeff, have we started this workshop yet?
We have not.
Okay. Is is this just the WASDA?
It is. And
Yes.
I'm sorry, we have started recording it, but we haven't started the workshop yet. But we are just talking about professional learning from WASDA. So your
Okay.
participation is optional.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Uh-huh. Hi, Connie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I am just choosing my virtual background.
Perfect. I don't know if you saw that Doug's email. He's unable to attend the workshop or meeting tonight.
Oh, wow. Okay. Is he still out in the wild?
Just a doctor's appointment thing that he was working through.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, that's part of the document. So Jeff, when I logged on, it looked like, or Gail, it looked like I logged on and then got promoted to presenter. So I don't know if that's where everybody else is. There's Tracy.
Yep, I'm here.
Right now, Connie, we don't have anybody else. The only attendee we have is Lisa, so we're still waiting on Corey.
Okay. Hi, Erica. Ooh, do you have a new background, Erica? Or a new house?
Ooh, what's your guess? Let's take bets. Do you like my new office?
I do.
Hi, Corey.
Well, hello. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there.
Tracy, good to see you. Erica, Connie, I think we've got everybody who's going to be here. So I've got us at 4:29. So when we hit 4:30, Connie, you're welcome to get us started if you'd like.
Okay.
So is Doug still MIA?
Yeah, he's unable to attend, I think, tonight.
Okay.
Yeah,
The full meeting or just the workshop?
both. He
Oh,
was uncertain.
Okay.
All right, I show 4:30 on the nose. So let's go ahead and get started chatting about our WASDA conference learning. Did you want to preface that with anything, Jeff, or do we all just?
Sure. Yeah, and just really short and sweet, hopefully. Typically the board attends the Washington State School Directors Association conference, and there's all kinds of opportunities to engage with other school boards and learn from other school systems and great speakers and vendors. And it's just a good opportunity to kind of recalibrate, I think, what we're doing and why we're doing it, and compare and contrast to the other 294 districts across the state. So I know we were supposed to be in Spokane, but we were all engaging virtually on Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday, and a little on Saturday. And so typically after the conference, we try to get together and have a workshop to talk about any learning that you guys had, things that you want to make sure that we hold on to or explore a little further and figure out maybe what next with that learning. And so just as a reminder, what I gave you guys in your guided notes for the session was a frame around our draft strategic plan for 2025. And also over the summer, you guys adopted an anti-racist policy that challenged you to commit yourself to looking at our board goals, looking at the strategic planning cycle through the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and monitoring and kind of creating transparency opportunities between the board and stakeholders. And so today is a good opportunity to do that. I know a lot of the sessions that I attended and you attended as well were really focused on equity, inclusion, diversity, and really trying to make sure that each of our students are feeling supported and have the opportunity to reach their dreams. So part of our strategic planning refresh is establishing this foundation of relationships, learning, equity, and support. And these are kind of the four main buckets. It's hard because the water can go in between the buckets, right? They're not mutually exclusive. And so it's really kind of one big bucket, but trying to organize them in certain ways to really give the board high-level goals so that they can think about and really direct us as a staff on where you would like to see us really invest our energy, time, and resources. So I asked you guys to think about the learning of the conference through the lens of relationships, learning, equity, and support. And I thought we might start, and we'll see how this works because I'm a real novice when it comes to Pear Deck. But Pear Deck is a new platform that we purchased from the recommendations of teachers. And it's a way to engage with students while you're doing slides or presentations. One of the things that's really a difficult part of remote learning is that you're not able to just walk by a student and check in and see how they're doing. It's a little more intentional, I guess, right? To create opportunities for that. We used to call them drive-by learning checks, right? You just walk by the table group, you'd listen in for a little bit, you kind of know if they were on track or not, and you'd be able to ask a question or offer support. And so Pear Deck is a way of doing that. So I'm gonna try this. I was in an 8th grade classroom today and she is an expert on it, Mrs. Givens, and I am not. So we'll see what happens with this. Okay. So the question that I'm going to ask you is what was a takeaway or takeaways for the conference from you? And you're going to be able to engage, and I'm going to put it in the chat box too for you so you can just go there, but students can engage in a couple of ways. They can go to joinpd.com and then put in the code, or I can copy this link and put it in the chat function, and then you guys should be able to click on that. And I apologize to any audience members. I'm only chatting with panelists here, so that should be coming to you. And then what happens is I'm able to, as a teacher, kind of monitor what you guys are seeing as your some takeaways from the conference. And so when I was in the classroom today, it was an 8th grade math class, and they were working on similar and congruent shapes. And so there were questions about similarity, and I just joined the class, so I answered too. I think I got a couple of them right even. So I felt pretty good about that. But then the teacher can monitor what's going on. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. And I'm gonna go back to my Pear Deck. Are you guys able to get in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Does it just show board workshop right now?
Yeah.
Good.
Mine shows.
And is it allowing you to type in a response?
Well, I put a smiley face for how I was feeling.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And then I just see like a title page. It says board workshop and the logo and
Yes.
Okay. So, and is it moving on you now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, there's a place to answer.
Yeah.
Top takeaways.
Yeah. And hopefully you're able to, if I set this up right. And again, I came from the class 1:30 to 2, and then I put this into our presentation tonight just as a way to start.
real-time learning.
Our top.
Okay, if you have the opportunity to type in, great. If not, we're gonna just kind of open up. So the idea here is as a teacher that I'm able to see Tracy, Corey, Connie's, Erica's responses and get that individual kind of where they're at. And then help the class as we move forward because I now have done my drive-by learning check. So, but not everybody who's watching on this call obviously is going to see the teacher version of that. So I think at this point, Connie, let's allow people to kind of share what one or two of their takeaways were. And then I'll keep redirecting us back to the themes. So I may ask you the question as you share your takeaway of do you think more about relationships, learning, equity, or support as we go through this? And then while you guys are talking, I'll try to pull up your responses if you were able to get in there and see what that said too. So does that sound okay, Madam President?
Sounds okay with me.
Okay.
Multitasking, typing and listening and talking.
I know we have a lot going on.
Would anybody like to start? I would recommend that we go by category. So start with the first category on the list, the relationships, and kind of march through our document. Does that sound okay? Or do you want to just start with your top three and your top learnings and verbalize?
I did a top takeaway, but I'm happy to go through each category. What do y'all think?
Well, what's your top takeaway? Let's do that first.
Well, my top takeaway is today is a perfect day to change. And I felt like we heard that over and over, the what ifs, and take away, ask key stakeholders what's working well in this remote time. What are we learning that we can use to move forward and move ahead when in-person learning happens? That there will never be a go back to normal. So let's question things that are in place right now, and are they serving students? And let's be shaking things up in our conversations and in structure.
Love it. I loved at the very end, I don't remember if it was in the keynote address or in the breakout session for, how do you pronounce her name? Ijeoma?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about though.
Oh, she said, where did I write it down? The fact that we've been able to mobilize and change and react to our global condition right now in so many different ways, in the ways that we shop, in the ways that we learn, in the ways that we do business in so many areas, shows that we can turn on a dime. And so the fact that we haven't, for reasons of racial equity, show more a lack of will than a lack of ability. And that was a gut punch. It's absolutely true. Look, it's phenomenal what we've been able to do in the time frame since the global pandemic. And like you said, Erica, this is the time for change. We can do it. We just proved to ourselves that we can make changes. And it got me thinking same along your vein of, we're not going to go back to normal. We have to move. There's some really great things that have come up as a result of this. For example, in Amy Campbell's keynote or her breakout session, talking about accessibility to our board meetings. Yeah. They are broadcast now. And so we are reaching a broader audience or the potential to. So how can we think of, inclusion and change and equity in light of all this new learning and new opportunities. I feel like my lens has shifted. When you talk about inclusion, that is so broad now. It's everybody. Are we serving every person everywhere in all the different, UDL modes that we can for everything? It's not, UDL is not just for the classroom, but it's for how we deliver news about the district, how we gather feedback when we do the thought exchange. Are we hearing all the voices in our thought exchange that we need? And if not, or like Amy said, are we hearing from the green and pink pieces? And if not, we need to go out and find them and make sure that we gather them. My dog agrees. Next, kick the dog out and talk amongst yourselves.
I would agree with all that you guys both said, and I put as my answer in there inclusion. Even though we've been working on that and hearing that for a long time, Amy's speech and then her breakout session were eye-opening for me, I guess. And I was thinking about this conference and how we're usually all in person and we're usually together, and I was a little disappointed to have to do it at home. But I've been changing that around and thinking, hey, there are other people that now were able to access this. Maybe there was people that never were able to attend WASDA before because their school district didn't have enough money or they couldn't take the time off or whatever. And so it opened the door for people who have never been before to be able to go to that. And I still learned just the same, and it was still a great conference. So you just have to change your way of thinking, I think, and I think that taught me a little bit of that. Also, what else? Oh, talking about the new normal. There's going to be a new normal. We're not going back to what we were before, and we've done some amazing things in this pandemic. The way that we've shifted gears, and I think we're going to come out better in the end. So it just might take us a few speed bumps to get there, but this is going to change a lot of things, and we're being forced to do so, and we're doing it. So those were some of my takeaways.
I don't have a whole lot that I would add to that, but I agree. I think taking a look at I thought the inclusion talk that we heard from Amy on the keynote the first day and then the breakout the next day, it did get me thinking, about, like, for example, the recording of these meetings. Once we get back to normal and we start meeting in person, I hope we start thinking right now about how we can keep broadcasting these meetings and archiving them in a way for people to go back and look at them. Like, I know that we're recording right now. These recordings all end up on our website somewhere. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, so just I think making that more clear, thinking ahead about, when we do come back into under a normal setting where we're in person, figuring out ways to make sure that we can all be heard by the people who are Zooming in. I think starting to think about some of that stuff now. I think if we're talking about kind of practical things we can start doing right away, I'd love to see that happening. I think board docs helps a lot with our inclusion, kind of going along with those, kind of going along with that theme. I liked when Amy was talking about how she was what is it? She switched Parent Square to French to see if it would actually really translate over and make sense. So I mean, just thinking about I don't know about necessarily like doing like almost an audit of what we are already doing. Some of our board practices around what could we do to be more inclusive that way. I think just kind of like you guys said, it just takes a little bit of turning your perspective and really looking at it from a different lens. To just a small change could really make a big difference for a lot of people. I've always thought that we've done a good job with being transparent, but maybe there is even if we're missing one or two people or a specific subgroup of people, then we're not really doing our job to the best of our ability there.
You guys did a great job of hitting those top things. I just wanted to share, I pulled the Pear Deck just so you could see kind of what a teacher would see like this. So your top thoughts that you just articulated are now up here, and I see a lot of Amy made a big impact, which I think is interesting because Amy is a frequent attender of our board meetings. You guys have all engaged with Amy, and still there was an opportunity to learn even more. And so that really challenged me to think too about the experts that we have within our district.
Mhm.
Every year we don't have the keynote speaker. I mean, that's kind of a pretty special thing. But we have amazingly talented staff. And, you know, as we talked about in our staff meeting a week or so ago, you know, the solutions are within us. It's just an as how do we get there, and the path to support people for coming up with those great ideas and then executing them consistently across the district. And it can't be, you know, 1,000 different ideas. That's the challenge, right? As taking a staff and unifying them in a direction. And I think that you guys have done a good job of that. So I'll pull this screen off again and let you guys discuss more, but that was our first round. Everybody kind of shared a takeaway. And so now maybe thinking about, you know, some action steps. We heard about continuing inclusive board meetings. We heard about just thinking in general about how do we keep making our district more inclusive. What are some other things that you think would be something that either aligns with already our direction, or something that maybe we need to pause and look around a little bit and make sure we're going in the right direction?
Well, I know that one thing that stood out to me, originally it got me thinking during Amy's keynote around, you know, relationships and support and that kind of stuff, and learning obviously, is bringing back our site visits in some way. You know, we used to do in-person site visits, and then what was funny is I think it was at our director area meeting that night or the next night. Donna Sinclair from Washougal was talking about how their board did some virtual site visits, and then I read an article in the Post Record about their virtual site visit, and so I'm like, hey, all right, maybe I'm not so crazy after all. Maybe this could work. So I would love it. I think, you know, I'm seeing we all have such different perspectives right now. I mean, I'm seeing it from you know, my high school band teacher side, but then I also see it from my third grade daughter side, and my wife, a fifth grade teacher, and, you know, but I don't know really what's going on at the, you know, at the middle school level or even the secondary level in Camas. So I would just love to see what's going on, and I think that would help me to, I think that would kind of help me to frame some of the comments that come in, you know, with the comments that we get about, you know, workload or remote learning, working or not working. I think just being able to experience that a little bit more would be great.
And I would totally agree with that. I think I don't know how you do it, if it was like a Zoom call and Jeff was live with his phone walking around or something, but to me, we miss those site visits and seeing what's going on in the classroom. And especially right now, since we're getting kids back, I think those would be beneficial to have some of those. And another thing I wrote down for action steps that I wrote down was community forums and listening posts, because I know Amy mentioned that as well, as far as how we're reaching the right people. And I know we used to do those, but we haven't done any since the pandemic. And how do we do that, and what does that look like, and would it be worth doing? I guess just something to explore, I guess, again.
And then it makes me think, when you say that, so what does that look like from an inclusion point? Do we have it on Zoom and in person, and people can sign up for us to give them a call? Or, you know, there's lots of different ways that we need to engage our community. Also, going back to Amy, I think what was really cool is that while we know who she is, and we know that she's doing great things in our district, to hear such a deep dive and learn about her learning process and how vulnerable she was about that, and saying, you know, I thought I was doing this great job, and then this parent said, yeah, but, and how it, you know, rocked her back on her heels, and she rethought and then tried a different route. And I just think that was so powerful to hear. And I hope that our teachers and our staff get a chance to hear that, and just, you know, because that's part of our world, right? That's learning. And it was such a great demonstration of how we ask our teachers to be vulnerable and to learn, and mistakes are okay as long as we're moving forward and we're learning from it. And I just thought that her journey was just really powerful. And just the way, I mean, she's completely shifted my lens on what inclusion means. Inclusion doesn't mean including students with disabilities in gen ed classes. That's such a myopic view, right? It's everything we're doing on, you know, diversity and equity, and looking at our LGBTQ populations. It's looking at different races and cultures and socioeconomic, and making sure that we are literally hearing all people. And her idea that we might yet not even see the fence that is in front of people, and then we need to look hard to see those fences. And then it just seemed like so many of the other sessions that I attended reinforced that. Like the Washington State history one, was the history we never learned, you know, learning about Washington State history through another lens, you know, is pretty shocking. And so how can we more quickly move so that our kids are seeing through these different lenses as well, and how to pass that on. It's big work, but we're doing it, and it can be done. And I want to make sure that our strategic plan really hones in on these things. If we're committed to UDL, then I want it to say right in there, because the UDL and inclusion and all this stuff that we're doing, they're all part of one big ball of work that we're working on, which was really reinforcing. I think that often we come away from WASDA thinking, yeah, I feel like we're on the right track. I think I didn't hear many mind-blowing things that we have never thought of or we haven't already done. But this time it reinforced that, but also gave a lot of food for thought for how we can do better and continue.
So one thing I wrote down, and I might have had it wrong, so I should watch it again, but she made a comment about Washington State ranking number 44 as far as inclusion in the classroom. I think that was right. That was a shocking or an interesting fact to me. I'm like, we're 44. So we obviously have a lot of work to do, I guess. So
yeah.
And I think I've asked this question in a meeting before, and I guess maybe as a tee-up, but also as a legitimate, what are the barriers? And are we having inclusion classrooms across all of our schools, all of our buildings? She talked about the support that she got from her principal. And I'm just wondering, are there buildings out there that aren't as inclusive as Helen Ballard, as that's the example that we get shared, that's shared with us, right? So that makes me wonder.
Right. How do we make sure that it's systemic and not just because we have the teacher of the year, this amazing Amy Campbell in our district doing great things and very passionate about it. We need to make sure our whole system moves in that direction, and it's not just dependent on one superstar, which I know we've got a lot of superstars in our district, but how to take what she's done and accomplished and make it system-wide.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do we want to move on to another category or other sessions that you went to? I'm going back and forth between my notes on the sessions and then kind of what we put in our document. I know there were a few comments on the Washington State history.
Right. I think I put those comments in learning, so that would be our next.
Okay.
Or was it equity? Yeah.
I think it could go in either.
I
Does
think
anybody want to talk about anything more on relationships? There's something about our school board agenda, making sure we're reflecting our
Right.
strategic plan.
I mean, right. And just reflecting back on keeping our eye on the ball, right? If these are our categories of our purpose of pushing these things forward, are we aligning our conversations to that? Are we aligning our website to that? And I talk about that in relationships, you know, one thing that is been very clear because of the shutdown is where people go for information. And you don't have to be a parent in our community to go to our website and get information. And I think keeping our website as the number one vehicle of communication and making sure that it is, you know, reviewed every day and updated, like that is the place that people can go to and rely on what's coming up for social emotional wealth from Jennifer McMillan, what's coming up for topics for the next school board meeting, when's the next town hall, all information in one place. I think is we're learning that these different mediums like Parent Square can't always rely on that, and people from the outside and people from different abilities want to join in. So it has to be an all-encompassing thing and a priority for us. On my to-do list is to update my bio. So I'm going to throw that out there to you all, but I feel like my bio for sure is 3 years old, and the goals and concerns I had 3 years ago are not the ones I have for tomorrow. And I'd like to update that maybe once a quarter.
Mhm. It'd be nice if we could have access to that and just go in and update and change it as needed. Erica, I
And
think
make that fresh and be real.
you're a dig. Corey Tracy, anything else you want to pipe in on under our
Yeah.
relationships?
Erica's face is frozen on my screen.
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't put stuff in the Google Docs, and then I couldn't get back. I'm not super great at Google Docs. I know it a little bit, but then I can't ever get back to it. So my stuff was all on the notes that I emailed, and they actually worked really well. During WASDA, I typed notes and then they emailed them to me in a Word document. So I have them all. You guys just don't have them all. But if I can talk about relationships, I don't know if this one fits in there or not, but I know a lot of us did some sessions on student voice and having a student on the board. So I don't know if that fits in this relationship category, but I liked that idea, and I learned a little in some of those, like some of the kids get a half a credit for being on the board, and some of them had like one-on-one mentors with board members, which I think that would be kind of cool too, right? That might be a lot of student voice, but if each of us had someone that we mentored, and then how do we get the right people in those seats so it's not the same people who are just doing it to have on their resume, but actually going out and looking for people that we want to have approach people that think they might not be able to do it, but encourage them so that they apply and do that. So I think having that student voice would be something that we could look at and consider.
Really
I know we
like
have.
the idea of having like a student committee.
I
Right.
have some strong feelings on this.
Right.
But no, not in a bad way. I have seen, because before I joined the board, I was kind of a nerd, and I watched other board meetings like in other districts and stuff like that, because I don't know, we won't get into that. But I have seen other school board reps, like student board reps, and it ends up just being like kind of a token position. And it goes to, the kid who's looking for something to add to the resume. And I really like, we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks in our meetings or in 2x1s or in our in citizen advisory about having a student advisory committee that mirrors the citizens advisory committee. And I really, especially after listening to some of the sessions on student voice, I feel really confident about that model over having a student rep or a couple of student board reps. I know one of the sessions I attended, I think some of the notes in our doc are from me about basically, about some of the things about to be a board rep in a lot of districts. It's things like, are you the ASB president? Is it based on attendance? Is it based on you need to get recommendations from your teachers or the principal recommend? And all of these things are just, in some ways, if we're talking going back to inclusion, are kind of unnecessary barriers or filters. And I like there was a quote that one of the presenters said during the meeting, that leaders may have a 1.5 GPA. It's not necessarily about, just being the straight A student. you know, maybe we need to hear from the students who, you know, are not I don't know, achieving at that level isn't the right term, but you know, it's important to hear from everybody. And so I really think that we should, Jeff, I think we should keep exploring that option of doing the student advisory committee, because I think we could get some authentic voice there. We could hear from several, you know, several segments of our student community. And yeah, I just think I think that's a great model, especially you know, last year we attended some conference. I know that Jeff, you and I attended a session where it was they were talking about student reps that had specific projects that they were working on. Connie, I think you were there too. Yeah, that was I like that model too, but I feel like that would be a model that would be easy to. It would be easy to kind of let up on the gas with that, I guess, and that it would eventually turn into just kind of a token, like, oh, these couple of kids are showing up to all of our board meetings, and there's a time where we ask, so what do the students think? You know, I think that instead really having that committee with a wide range of voices, I think that would be a great thing. I would love to sit in on it.
I like that idea. And then we could rotate in as board members, because I think getting them time in front of the school board, I think they would feel like that's a great experience for them, right? So
Yeah,
I don't.
or maybe they could do something like we have the Citizens Advisory Committee do, or the Budget Committee do, where they appoint a chair or some sort of representative who then comes occasionally and speaks to the board about what they've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Is there an opportunity with OPMA, like we're doing Zooms and we are discussing and there's other people who are listening, that like we could do that for, you know, we could do that for the students advisory, so that we could all listen to the discussion and the value of what's happening without being active participants, but we can hear their voices. So I think there's lots of creative ways that we can make sure that we are hearing from a cross section, right? And
Or
really
like how we
inclusionary.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I hate Zoom sometimes.
Yeah.
Or like how we've been doing, like with the budget committee or even the CAC, where a couple of us attend, but then the meeting is recorded and shared with everybody else. I like that, you know, to be able to go back and review as well. That might be an easy way to incorporate what we're already doing.
I think speaking of voice, I'd like to hear more of the teacher, the union voice more often. I'm sure they're invited all the time to come and talk, but I would really like to have a cadence of maybe even a workshop, you know, to talk about what's going on, to get that voice as well. It could also be blended with another superstar, right? Another what's being what's exemplary, and what does everybody need to hear? What do we need to be thinking about? You know, look at us hearing the inclusion and more details around that, and it just flourishes for our ideas. So what else is out there? Maybe those are good use of workshops.
Mm-hmm. I like that. It's all the same thing as the classroom visits, the site visits, and hearing a deep dive from an educator's perspective and a journey, and you know, talking about inclusion. It's hearing voices from staff and seeing them in action, and seeing the great things that are happening in schools, and seeing where the challenges are. You know what?
Right.
You know, right now we have very different challenges than we had at this time last year, and that hopefully we'll have at this time next year. And so understanding those, and, you know, those should be driving our budgets and our, you know, our strategic plan. We need to know about that so that we can make sure that we have the right plan, and that everything that's going on is related to that. What are the struggles that we have with that? What are the great things that we're making progress with that we need to share more broadly? I just feel like this WASDA for me was just really crystallizing a lot of different things.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I know one thing that I would love to figure out ways, yeah, where we can, where the board can work more opportunities for us to interact with staff, I think, is good. With like you were saying, Connie, the deep dive with educators. I mean, not blurring that line between, obviously, the board and the labor groups and all that. But I do think one of the things that always irks me when we go to these WASDA meetings, when I when I put my educator hat on and stuff, is hearing some of the board members who are just, and rightfully so, they have their reasons, but they're frustrated with WEA, which then turns into bashing of the union, which then is, bashing of the teachers. And I just think about, where are some opportunities where we can work together with our labor groups and members of our labor groups to form those relationships, so that when things do get, because, in all of the cycles of everything, there are times where things get, tense, but those relationships are what matters, and to help to work through those tough times. And I know it's something that we've talked about in the past, but again, if we're talking about crystallizing things, that's something that every time I go to these WASDA meetings, I think, gosh, I'm so glad that we don't verbalize those things or think that way about, our partners that we need to work with in our labor groups. And so I think the more that we can find ways to collaborate on things, it will help times when later on, when there is that natural tension that, I mean, frankly, it comes up. It's going to happen when we have those times.
And
And
then
I
like
think if we're moving forward ahead of with these big changes, right? Of like, this is the time for disruption. We can't do it without them. So we need to strengthen our understanding of what they want to share with us, so we can we can incorporate that into this movement of change for all of us. So I think about the calendar, and all know I think about the calendar. And if the calendar is set up to serve students, and we can't change the calendar without our, without our WEA team, our CEA team. And so there, if we're moving into learning, into the next bucket, that's part of the don't go back to normal, and I heard calendar, time to reinvent the calendar or look at it in a different way in a couple of different sessions last weekend, and talking about that more balanced approach. And I'd like to, did I pause again?
Yeah.
You
I
did,
hit
but
that?
you're good.
Yeah. We're hanging on your every word.
It was a dramatic pause. Yeah.
Oh, I should do it with this.
Yeah.
But, what is holding us back? And what if, we always incorporate these types of dates and calendars and starting dates with all of our partners in Clark County. What if we were the ones in Clark County that pushed and said, this is what we think is important, because we believe that the calendar needs to serve our students. There's already been these, long understandings of these learning loss during the summer because of 9 weeks off or plus, right? And if we trim that down and talk about that with our partners and get that conversation moving, not everybody in the state can do it, but we could do it.
I agree. I am fighting my gut reaction to think, oh my gosh, Jeff, if we put one more big thing on his plate, we all have so much to do right now. But then again, we have to rethink how we do it. This doesn't have to be a giant thing on Jeff's plate. We have CAC that we can task to do some research. We can get more engaged and figure out, how could we do it, right? Because we are stretched very thin and things are different, but we don't want to lose this opportunity to not go back to normal just because it's easy, but to be sensitive to, what does that look like? Maybe we get together and brainstorm a little bit and each go out and do some research and bring it back and share and have CAC look into it. And what does that look like? What does it mean?
And I don't know
That's
if this is,
overburdening our system right now.
and Yes, and I don't know how this would be possible, but something I got from WASDA that I always leave there thinking is, I like connecting with other school board members. And how do we meet with them? You know, I know some of the Evergreen ones and Vancouver ones, but how do we do that with a purpose, right? Like maybe and discuss what they're doing, because we don't always know what they're doing. And it's not that we have to do what they do, but it's nice if we're going to do something like changing the calendar or doing stuff like that. Like, how do we just get together with other school board members? And have that discussion of how they're tackling those things without it being WASDA and without it being a District 6 meeting, because I don't think we get out of it that kind of thing.
And
Well, I think-
share just what we're thinking. Here's what
Yeah.
we've been thinking this quarter.
Yeah.
Not
And
that
even
we're necessarily
that-
doing, but this is what we're thinking. What are you all pushing forward? What are you all
Yeah.
thinking?
I know that it happens on a superintendent level,
Mhm.
but not a school board level. And so, you know, and we used to have sort of get-togethers with Hawkinson and Washougal.
I was gonna say, I remember that. Yeah.
And there used to be a quality schools committee that Evergreen spearheaded, that we would get together with districts from the county and talk about regionally important issues and legislative pushes. But we don't do that anymore. So that is something else that we can bring up. We might not have all the WASDA District 6 positions nailed down, but that doesn't mean we still can't lead for change in our region. And I think as we've learned through this COVID experience by you know, the superintendents all being in communication and realizing that this isn't just a district by district issue, but it, you know, there's this free flow between districts. Same with the school calendar. It would be very difficult, or it would be easier if it wasn't just us that made the move. You know, if we could have a plan to sort of move to that direction for our larger community. Granted, we can't control what anybody else does, but we certainly can have that conversation.
So I want to interject. We're about 10 minutes or so left in this conversation today, and it's perfect timing for this conversation because in the December meeting, we'll be bringing the strategic plan back to you guys, and really looking to finalize that early in 2021. And so some of these thoughts could be potential action items. This iteration is 2025. And so it's a good time to think about, you know, big projects and where those might go and land. But as we kind of wrap up tonight, just thinking about what you've heard from your colleagues and you getting a chance to articulate some of your learning, what would be a priority moving forward based on these conversations? We've talked about calendar, we've talked about site visits now in the virtual world and what that could look like in the future. We talked about really trying to get voice from all different stakeholders in our community. And you guys talked in particular about our labor leadership and staff. You talked about student advisory roles and relationships. And I'll give you a quick update on that during the board meeting today of where we're at with that process. So those are some of the topics. I know there were more, but just want to make sure everybody has a chance to just kind of say, if I was going to have us take one thing from this, this is what I'd want it to be.
Can I quickly add one more thing to that list, that summary list? Just, we talked in the very beginning about gathering voice from our community in ways that are, you know, more inclusive. So I don't want to leave out our community voice. Anybody
So
want
if
to?
you're looking for me to pick one that is the most important, I thought they all were important, but the one that I wrote down was just that, Connie, was voice from our stakeholders and community, because especially right now, we need it the most, right? Like, I want everybody to be heard. And how do we go out to reach those few people? Well, not few, there's probably a lot that aren't being heard, or the ones that feel like they are not strong enough to have a voice, or they shouldn't have a voice. And not everybody has the internet and can watch the town halls, and not everyone has time to do the surveys. And some people might still want a paper survey or phone call. I mean, I don't know, like, how do we get more voice? Because I feel like we've captured a group, but we're not capturing outside of that group. So I don't know how to solve that, but I think that's an important one.
I would agree with that. That I think that and just kind of that broader topic around inclusion. I think if that drives maybe more of our like 2x1 conversations and that kind of stuff, I would love to see that. But yeah, I mean, I think voice is, you know, without just echoing exactly what Tracy said. I think that's got to be our. It seems like the smartest place to go to right now in the situation that we're in.
Yeah, I think we're just all saying the same thing. And I think what comes from it is understanding of, did I freeze again? That's why y'all are smiling. Gosh darn.
You're
You're
good.
back.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah.
Is, how are we reaching people? We talked about website. We talked about these meetings. We talked about an audit. We talked about voices from different stakeholders. So I think we're all saying really the same thing, and just pulling all those pieces together. So
Ditto.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, it's voice. We want to make sure that we're hearing everybody's voice, whether that's every student, every staff member, every parent, and making sure that we're doing that in an inclusive way. And if we're not hearing from a particular subgroup, then we need to go out and seek that voice out. And in the Ijeoma, I'm sorry that I'm not pronouncing that right. She talked about making sure that you build in those checkpoints to gather voices rather than making decisions saying, we think this is best for these people. Make sure that we ask and have checkpoints to continue that and be able to readjust as the needs change. And so just really hearing and let the needs of our community and group help guide what we're doing.
One other thing I wrote down that Amy Campbell said is she said, we need to go to our community. We can't expect our community just to come to us. So
Right.
we do have to go out and find those people that we're not connecting with.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
I like that we've all from the, we didn't all go to all the same sessions, but jumped around. I think we all hit a lot of the same sessions at different times, but the fact that all together it's come up with a very consistent message. Granted, there was lots of other learnings of little details in here
Mhm.
that I'm not exactly sure. Maybe go through the document and summarize if there's any other more tactical learning that or ideas that we can capture that somewhere. Maybe just we'll add another category at the bottom of that Google Doc. Because I think what we're talking about, as we should, are very strategic things, but if there's just other little learnings that we want to flush out and highlight, that would be good.
I'll try to get back into the Google Doc, but
Send
Tracy,
you the link.
if you want to just email me your notes, I can include them in the Google Doc if you'd like, and I will have them in the weekly update again this week, which will come out tomorrow. So
I think I just need to go to the Google Drive and find that. I get confused because I have like five, and I just,
I agree.
yeah.
it's hard for me to go back and find the one I'm looking for. And so that's it. But
Erica actually asked a great question in there about Drive, and we have not created a Drive for you. It's always in the weekly update. So like if I had one recommendation in our current organization format, and we can change it and modify it, it's just to keep the weekly update email in one place, because that has all the links for the week. And I try to keep those active for a while. And then I start fading them off as things aren't as timely. But it's just keeping everyone organized. Is like you can find the perfect solution, but there isn't, right? It's always trying to evolve it and make sure it's meeting your needs, because that's the purpose of it. So if there's a better way to do it, then I want to hear it to support you. I think as a takeaway before we give you a break, I'm all for hearing all the voices and trying to be as inclusive as possible. But I would challenge you to think about, like, what is it that you're missing right now? Who, and you guys talked about those benchmarks and the, really trying to monitor who are we hearing from and who aren't we hearing from? And what is it that you want to hear? Because is it about our programming? Is it about our staff and how they engage? Is it about, because you guys as a board have policy, right? Like that's your job, is to set policy and set direction for the district. So if you hear something very specific as a board, you really don't have a lot of action on that. I mean, you direct me to figure that out and investigate it, but you don't really control who's the JV coach of the whatever you might hear, right? And so then I think it's helpful because you don't want to set the community up to be frustrated with that either, right? Like you ask, you want to hear, and then they tell you a very specific thing. But as a board member, then you kind of feel like, well, how do I affect change with that very specific thing? So it might be really important to think about how do you put the conversation at a level that they can provide you something that you can respond to, if that makes sense.
Maybe. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Maybe
Okay.
one way we can reframe that then from a kind of if we're looking at it more of a top-down model is maybe ask some of our buildings or our principals, who do you feel like you're not hearing from? So maybe put it more on those systems right now to really think about and dig into, this is the information you're hearing from, start thinking about what aren't you hearing? Maybe we can put that into kind of like one of our, the Poptoa cycles and stuff like that.
That's a great reframe, Corey, because now as a board, you're directing us to engage audiences, but you're empowering the level at which that we can affect change for those audiences, right? Really timely. And the other thing that you might think about is you guys have talked about inclusion and community. And so perhaps a way of framing the conversation and to help us with the 2025 strategic plan is to ask the community, what does an inclusive, welcoming community mean to you, right? What's important for you about a community? And then you can hear that, and then you can direct kind of policy level of how does a school system fit into a community that's welcoming? What are those attributes, right? And so that might be something to think about as well. And if that was something you're interested in, that would be a great like thought exchange type initial level where we could have some identifying information in the conversation, so you could know, are these staff members, are these parents, are these, do they have children who are served through a 504? And we could start to see, to the analogy that Amy did, what puzzle pieces are missing in this conversation. And we could follow up with like a listening post, after the thought exchange, what are you missing? And then some very targeted things, even to your point, Tracy, of maybe, here's 5 parents that are representing a group that we're not hearing a lot. Tracy, why don't you give them a call? I mean, that would be pretty amazing, right? A board member calling and saying, here's a question about community that we're really wanting your input on. So just some things to think about as we wind down. Great workshop today. It's really helpful for me just to listen to you guys process through the information. And tomorrow in the weekly update, there'll be some more follow-up with that link for the notes page. And then also Gail will include the board self-assessment. So if you recall in the years past, we would do the self-assessment before the WASDA conference, and then we would pick sessions based on that self-assessment. We're doing a little different now, partly because just we don't have time to figure that out before we went to the conference. But I think it actually will work really well. And so now that you've had this learning, we'll ask you, and within a 3 to 4 week period, to go in and do the self-assessment related to the standards. So,
And I just wanted to thank you for creating this structure for our notes and
Yeah.
to kind of frame our learning. I found that very helpful. And you just must. Coming at every time we come back for WASDA, we're all like, oh, and let's do these 100 things. And we're all hyped up and you're like, whoa. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the bumpers and the reframing and making sure that we are looking at making sure that we are staying in our lanes and doing what we can do to make sure that this happens district-wide. So thank you.
Thank you guys. And I saw that Amy Campbell just jumped on as an attendee for the board meeting, which will start soon. And we're going to stay on this same link, but I know you guys would probably like, you've said some very nice things during this workshop about the keynote. So I don't know if there's anything you want to pass along to Amy.
When Gail posts this recording, Amy, you should go back and watch it.
She gave lots of shout outs about the board during her speech, so come watch ours.
Well, we'll go ahead and Connie, if you're okay, we'll adjourn this workshop at 5:25 and then we'll start up the regular meeting at 5:30.
Okay.
Are we adjourned,
We
President Hennessy?
are adjourned at 5:25 and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, it's 5:30. I'm gonna go ahead and call our meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back for those of you that were at our workshop. We're gonna start with our Pledge of Allegiance this evening. So if you will all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, and liberty for justice for all. I think I just botched that. That was embarrassing. Okay. We are going to start our meeting with, as always, our favorite part, the Milltown Pride Award. And Dr. Snell, take it away.
Thanks, Connie. And don't feel bad about the pledge because that's my worst fear. You never say it by yourself.
Right.
In a Zoom setting, and in your head, at least in my head, all these visions of, oh, am I going to forget the next line? And I get a little panicked with it. So it's a
I
great.
think I got all the words in there. They might not have been in the right order.
You
Just
did a good job. We
throw 'em
appreciate
all in.
you doing that for us tonight. As you said, this is our favorite part of the agenda, Milltown Pride. And for those of you who are new to the call, we really try to recognize staff that are just, we have a fantastic staff in general, but there are certain people, certain times that really just shine a light and are incredible examples of who we all aspire to be. And this Milltown Pride is really, the idea is it's the best of what we used to be, the best of who we are now, and the best of who we hope to be as a community moving forward. And I have the pleasure of introducing to you to Patty Place this evening. And the nominee for this nomination came from the Ballard staff. And in looking at the call, there was a number of Ballard staff that are on the line tonight, I'm sure, here to support Patty. So I'm going to read what they submit to me for you, the board, to hear, and love these pictures of Patty too. We would love to honor a very special Helen Ballard staff member for the Milltown Pride Award. Patty Place is a fixture at Helen Ballard. She has been here for 20 years and has worked in our district for 21. As a supervision paraprofessional, Patty is instrumental in supporting students as they learn how to communicate effectively and work play collaboratively. She guides her team to consistently enforce expectations and encourages positivity, teamwork, and risk-taking. Patty does more than supervise students. She teaches and raises caring, active, and positive citizens. This year, she has been instrumental in getting our support room up and running. She has spent her evening learning platforms to gain the knowledge she needs to effectively support kids. Patty is the person who flies under the radar and works behind the scenes to make things happen. It is not uncommon to find her up to her elbows in dirt in our garden, donating her time and working nights and weekends to tend to things that might otherwise go undone. As you can see in the attached photos, Patty takes great pride in the playground environment. She volunteered her artistic skills and her husband's to get our playground map painted and ready for kids. Patty exudes positivity. She is level-headed and proactive. She serves as a role model for students and staff alike. Patty sees the good in every situation and is quick to point it out, even under the most trying circumstances. Our community is gifted with her presence, and we know her impact runs far and deep. We want Camas School District and our entire community to know how much we appreciate her dedication, skill, and personal touch. Patty is our hero. I love that write-up. It's one of my favorite things is to get these nominations and just read about how much people have touched the community just through, and always they just are so humble about it. And so I'm looking at our attendee list here and I see Patty on here. So I'm going to see if Patty, you would like to talk at all. Let's see.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you.
Oh, you did. Hi, Patty. It's so good. We always are like waiting to see if we can hear from you. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm honored. I love what I get to do and where I get to work. And Helen Ballard is just, it's like a second home to me. So I'm, I'm really grateful to get to do what I get to do. Thank you.
Well, we greatly appreciate you, Patty, and on behalf of the school board, we will make sure to get your Milltown Pride Award out to you, maybe during one of those kindergarten recesses that are happening now, okay?
All right, that'd be great. Thank you.
Congratulations, Patty.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, and congratulations, Patty.
Thank you, Patty.
We're going to move on to board communications, and for board communications, maybe just share a little bit. We just had a whole hour discussing our learnings from our Washington State School Board Association conference that we go to every year. This year, it was for the first time virtual that we got to experience. And so we just spent the last hour sort of discussing our learnings and sharing. And so if you all just maybe want to share your top learnings or what you came out of the conference with, or anything you'd like to share about it. Do you want me to call on you one by one so you could do it, or do you just want to popcorn in? Corey.
I think we can just jump in. Yeah, because it's a conversation, right? And without playing to the room too much in here, I think that we were, when we wrapped up, we were talking about how big of an impact Amy Campbell had on all of us during the keynote that she presented, and then her breakout the next day. It's a good reminder about the awesome resources that we have inside our own district that I think when we were talking about in the previous hour about kind of tapping our own, but Amy, you got us thinking a lot about inclusion and what inclusion means. I'm sure I'm probably going to end up saying a lot of the same things that everybody else is saying. So I'll turn it over to you guys as well. But Amy, we appreciate you showing up to all of our board meetings, but you really got us thinking, and we're ready to hear more from you too.
Of course, I'm going to echo what Corey says. And that really was, I honestly want to go back and watch it again, which is one thing I loved about the WASDA this year, is that all those sessions are recorded. And so we can go back and watch them again. And so if we didn't get our notes exactly right, or if we want to go back and just listen to them again. So that is one bonus that come out of WASDA having it be virtual this year, I would say. And I feel like we had so many people, they were impressed. They're like, wow, you have people coming to your board meetings, and Amy goes to your board. I think when we were in our Director Area 6 meeting, somebody mentioned that it's great that we get some participation in those. And yeah, inclusion was one of the biggest takeaways that I had as well.
And just talking about when we move forward and what are the changes and things that we've done different that we want to continue to utilize. And Amy being able to be at home in Portland and be able to be on our calls is one example that we want more people to be able to attend, quote in air quotes, our meetings and be able to participate in our meetings and our conversation. And so that got us thinking to all the different areas of our strategic plan of how are we hearing and learning and including in terms of, when we're talking about our relationships, when we're talking about equity, it just really touched on each segment. And so thank you, Amy, for taking that time to be there at that, not just for the keynote that evening, and being live on that keynote, but then your session the next day. What I found as a bonus for being virtual is that ideas would trigger during a session, and it wasn't you just walking down the hall shoulder to shoulder with a school board member from Orcas Island, but we were all in there at the same moment. And so the chat function, oh, we do this at our school. Tell me more about that, Bill, Susie, I love that. I'd love to hear more about that. And so in real time, whatever is being triggered, we can share and learn. And so I really appreciated that.
Thank you. I would ditto all of that as well. I feel like Amy Campbell, our educator from our own Helen Ballard, if anybody doesn't know on this call yet, was the Washington State Teacher of the Year. Her reign is just coming to an end. And Amy, you're amazing. And I had mentioned in our discussion earlier, just your sharing your learning journey and how your experiences have shaped how you work with children and your colleagues and peers was just amazing and really vulnerable and really powerful. And I think that whole thing was just a big paradigm shift for me, and it changed the lens through which I learned everything else at the conference. And so thank you for that. And we're so proud of you. I mean, I feel this is one time I wish we were walking around in the halls and we could say, oh yeah, Amy Campbell. Camas, she works in Camas. We're so proud of you. And so, yeah, for me, it was all about hearing voices, make sure that we are hearing all the voices in our community, from our students, from our staff members, and to make sure that the decisions that we are making are guided by hearing from all groups, whether that is our equity work, whether that is our working with special ed or ELL learners, English language learners. But it trickles into everything that we do. And I'm sensitive to some of you on our call, maybe thinking, well, we can't even say anything at the board meeting, it's just us talking. And while that's true, there are lots of other avenues that we ask for and receive input and questions and answers. The board meeting isn't that conversational amongst attendees, and we realize that, but there are lots of other ways. There are thought exchanges, our listening posts, and more areas that we're going to probably figure out as we go to make sure that we're hearing from every voice and make sure that we're meeting those needs. And when we're not, then that's when we can make sure our policy matches that. So thank you all. It was great. That brings us to our public comments. Looking at a board communication, did anybody want to make any comments about the town hall? I mean, we had a town hall a week ago. Was it just a week ago today, Jeff? And then we've had some folks in the parking lot since then, and wanting us to open schools sooner than our current plan. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we are hearing many voices right now. And so I don't know if anybody wants to pipe in and comment any further.
I greatly appreciated this updated town hall. It felt like an update, to get back together and hear through that thought exchange where people's thinking is at, where their concerns are at, and really greatly appreciate people taking the time to give us that input. It was an odd week for us to do it in the realm of Governor Inslee had just come out the day before, and our case numbers in our community just skyrocketed, unlike they had ever taken off before. So it's an unfortunate situation that we continue to be in with our community case numbers at the level that they are, and we can continue to plan and discuss, but I also appreciate looking ahead and being thoughtful about guesstimating how long it will take for our numbers to get to a moderate place in order to give families a actual date for planning, for teachers, maybe planning, but looking ahead and knowing where our big markers are, where secondary finishes the first semester, where spring break is. And I think looking at those big indicators and where our numbers continue to be and making some guesstimates and just putting a line in the sand helps with planning and thinking ahead and mindset of wrapping people's minds around this is where we are and it looks like this is where we're going to be until X date. And so I would like to have us be thinking that way.
I would agree with that. I think we always agree with each other's comments, but I'm going to echo some of that. But one thing we didn't talk about at our board workshop was, I know we all also attended the Chris Reichdahl and Tim Garchow back and forth answering questions. And, you know, it just came out about, and I know we've talked about this as well, that there could be some possible changes coming to the decision tree on what moderate is. And I don't know when that will happen, but I know that they did talk about that. And another thing, this may be off topic, that they talked about was how it was local school board control over that, and how we're struggling with risk assessment and our insurance about what happens if we go against what Clark County Public Health tells us. Like that's a serious thing for us. And although they give us local control, we also have to be listening to Clark County Public Health, which is why I think we have those conversations with them all the time, and all the superintendents meet with them to kind of get him to, I don't know, have him agree with what we're doing, because it's a huge thing if we become liable for something and our insurance won't protect us on that.
I don't really have anything else to add to it, but I look forward to hearing, I know Jeff's going to touch on this in a presentation here in a little bit, and kind of seeing what he says. I'm sure will spur some more discussion with us. So I'll reserve my time.
Thank you all for that. That will move us to public comments. And I believe we have 3 public comments that Dr. Snow will read for us.
Yeah, Connie, thank you. I have 2 comments that are definitely well within the 3 minutes. And so I'll read those in their entirety. And then the third comment is quite detailed. And so I provided that to you in written form, and I will also summarize that comment for you this evening. The first is, and I'll just read them as I'm reading them. So I'm going to say my name is Jill. So just so you know, I'm not actually Jill, but I'm representing Jill's comments here this evening. My name is Jill Blasing. I'm a mother of 2 children in the Camas School District, a 6th grader and a 9th grader. I'm writing to extend my support and appreciation for the current remote learning model developed for the safety of students and teachers. While this is not an ideal situation, it seems like the only careful and thoughtful option given our circumstances with the pandemic. Thank you for considering the health and safety of this community and for supporting our hardworking teachers. Jill Blasing. The second one, to the CSD board. For the record, my name is Aaron Ali, and I reside in Vancouver, Washington with 2 children at Lacamas Lake Elementary. At this point in our collective COVID year, I feel compelled to let you know how pleased our family is with the approach you and the superintendent have taken with our community. The communication methods have been frequent and transparent, and the information and decisions you have made are based on the best known science at the time. In their respective online classrooms, my children feel loved and connected with their teacher and classmates, and they are learning. While there have been struggles with online classrooms, we recognize that our absence from the building allows for a safer environment for students and staff who must be there. This collective approach has been a great motivator and teaching point for our children. Thank you for doing your best to keep everyone safe, connected, and moving forward to a COVID vaccine. Aaron. And the third and final comment is from James Jang, another parent and community member. And the details of this comment are aligned to or related to Verizon has reinitiated a process to construct a cell tower facility on the property adjacent to Woodburn Elementary School. This process was initiated last November, and then it kind of just stopped at some point, and now the process is being initiated again. And I shared that with you guys in your weekly update on Friday that they have initiated the process again. And this parent has provided a lot of information related to the placement of the cell phone tower. And I will make sure that you have all that information. And if you have questions for me, you can do that. And you also know that Heidi Rosenberg is our point person on this. And I provided you with some literature today about this issue as well. So, and that's the end of public comments for this evening.
Jeff, will that the full context or transcript of that public comment, will that be included in our notes for the record?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And could I ask, in our future board docs documents, we have under public comments, it says public comments guidelines, but the guidelines aren't linked in there. Jeff, can we make sure that those get linked in there? Just
Yes, we can.
even though they're written right now and we don't need to have access to that, but someday we'll be in person again. It'd be nice to have that linked in there so we can pull it up when needed.
Absolutely.
Did everybody get a chance to look at the human resources addendum to the agenda? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
I
And I'll note that it's unanimous. We're missing Doug Quinn tonight. He's not able to be here. So that was a unanimous vote for the 4 of us that are present. Thank you. That brings us on to reports, superintendent's report, then the monthly budget report. So superintendent's report, Jeff, take it away.
Thanks, Connie. I'll just start off with the usual around town and just some high level items, and then I'll go into a little more depth around some of these. The first one is you guys talked about in the workshop the ability to capture student voice, and through your review, I have started a student advisory council, at least getting us ready to launch. And we're trying to mirror the Citizen Advisory Council. And so a monthly kind of meeting that would be representative students from across the district, grades 7 through 12. And so next week, I actually have 2 focus groups, a middle school focus group and a high school focus group. This isn't the exact actual student advisory council. These are just groups of kids that I want to talk to them about what is it that they would like to contribute in a school district. How can we engage students? What does the format look like? And so I have a series of questions to just really, I have some ideas of what this looks like, but if it's a student advisory council, it really needs to be guided by what students think this should look like. And so I'm super excited to have that. We'll have all the middle schoolers in one section and then all the high school students in another session. I also had the pleasure of attending a class today, an 8th grade class, and I shared with you guys this morning or in the workshop a little about that experience in Paradeck. And Paradeck is a new tool that teachers had been investigating, and Megan Johnson had led some work around that, and the recommendation was that it would be a good support for staff. So we recently adopted that tool, and I had the pleasure of attending Mrs. Given's class. I asked Mrs. Johnson for a teacher that was using it fairly consistently. I emailed her and she said, well, pop into my class at 1:30 if you'd like. And so I joined her class, and she was using it with social emotional learning, which I know has been a priority for you guys. And then she was also using it to give formative feedback to learners related to math lesson around similarity and congruence. And so I'm going to meet with her tomorrow and just talk more about the tool and how it's working for her. You know, being a former math teacher, I'm really looking forward to that conversation because I was really excited to see how she was using it in the lesson today. I mentioned in the workshop as well, the self-assessment for you guys is coming up, an annual assessment where you rate yourself on the school board standards. And so I use that information to try to prioritize professional learning for you guys over the rest of the year. And so Gail will give you a window of time. It usually takes about a half hour or so. You guys are all vets now with it, so it may be not might not take quite as long. And we'll be able to then also show historical data for you guys of just where the board has ebbed and flowed related to the standards. On next Friday, Gail will also include this in the weekly update that I'll send out tomorrow. The legislative forum for ESD 112. It'll be virtual this year, 10 a.m. to noon. We have also in the weekly update tomorrow a draft legislative priority list from the district. We recognize that you guys are going to want to dig into that a little bit. And so I didn't ask Doreen to like polish this up at all. You know, it's just kind of where we stand, a one pager now. So I'd encourage you to review that and give us some direction on where you would like that legislative priority list to land. Community meetings, Dr. Williams and I have been engaging with PTAs, Rotary, any kind of organization that will take us, and just talking about where we are. This is typically what we do, state of the community, and then we follow up with these outreach meetings. And this year we canceled the state of the community. The port and the city just didn't feel like it was a good time to do that, and we agreed. But we have done 14 of these now. Another thing that happens in these community meetings, we've talked a lot about returning to in-person learning, and then we talk about the upcoming replacement levies. And so these are great stakeholder groups that give us good feedback. And it's important for us to give them the information that they need to educate better their communities as well. We talked a little about WASDA Learning. I have a slide on that. And I wanted to share and just acknowledge kindergarten teachers. And I saw a couple of them on the call here earlier. I'm going to see if they're still on here. I know Amy Wing was on here earlier, and Marilyn Canfield from Helen Ballard. It looks like a couple of them are still on here. So just want to say thank you. You guys have done a tremendous job over the last couple of weeks. And you know, every person's experience is going to be unique through this. And I did ask Doug Hood, who meets with the kindergarten advisory team, has a representative from each school, just for a quote, you know, kind of we're in 2 weeks. And this is from Kathy Sherrill, who teaches at Dorothy Fox. I love this quote. And Kathy's a longtime teacher, has done an amazing job here. And I think this is hard. Like, it's hard to try to navigate and figure this out. And people have a lot of different emotions around it. And there's fear. So we try to figure out how to navigate pandemic best. But what is consistent is the love of kids. And Kathy's words here represent very similar words to whether it's Amy Campbell's class, and I'm able to talk to the staff in there, or it's Mr. Hines' class and his service of students. It's that joy that you get when you're engaging with students in person. And so we long for it. We're glad that we're having these opportunities in a really careful, measured way. And we want to expand it over time, thoughtfully and incrementally. I also asked Doug to give me a principal perspective as well. And this is from Mr. Graham. And again, you're going to see similar themes of joy, resiliency, and just the logistics are kind of a little challenging, right? Like we've organized school in one way, and now we're thinking about it in different ways. And so that can be, you know, just has to be top of mind. And then also you guys had asked in the last meeting, you know, how are we supporting the families that want to stay remote? And we don't want to leave anyone out of this as we try to figure this out. And so this just gives you a little more information from Mr. Graham about one of his classes that one of his kinder teachers is taking the remote only section. And so that means that students have had to kind of reshift in their communities. And, you know, that's always a challenge. But when you have outstanding educators like Miss Lawrence, she's rapidly building community and singing songs. And I think, you know, it's positive. Apples and Bananas Vow Song, you know, is a good community builder. So wanted to just kind of loop back with you guys on the kindergarten experience. I know we featured it a little more in the last board meeting. The other thing is you guys have both referenced, all of you've referenced the learning that you had from the WASDA conference. And just wanted to reiterate that these learning themes are a part of the core of our strategic plan refresh. And so really recognizing that all of our learning needs to be put through the filters of how does it help us build relationships and sustain relationships in our community? How does it help us with learning? how does it help us with equity and support? And so you guys did a great job of using those filters with the professional learning that you did last week. And just I want to also acknowledge you guys, your time. I know that members of the community, you know, our board members volunteer, right? And they show up and they come to these meetings, and we try to make them as engaging as possible, but sometimes it's a little long. And then on a weekend in November, they always go to this conference, and they take time off of work, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and they engage because it matters to them. And so I'm really grateful for you guys. And I was laughing because, you know, usually I try to take you guys all out to dinner, and I didn't, like, I saved some money this year. Maybe we should just do Zoom all the time. But I missed that opportunity of just the fellowship and the, you know, the relationships that we have. And I just want to acknowledge your service to our community. It's not an easy time to be a school board member. And you volunteer for this, you sign up for it. So thank you very much. And then as we've been doing, I'm asking Dr. Williams this month to give you an update. And last time it was Doug. We're just alternating between elementary and secondary. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Williams, in this slide. Maybe you can walk them through it.
Okay, well, good evening. And it's always a pleasure to give you a little bit of update about what's happening at secondary. So you'll see here in the first box, we have a little bit about our attendance. I think because we were having some changes in the way we were collecting attendance before, we were able for this report to provide you a comparison of last year, so 2019, 2020, from September 3rd to November 20th, last Friday, what that looked like a year ago. So for this range of attendance, you kind of see where we compare. So we have a picture of our 6 schools right there, and you see we hover roughly between a 0 to 3% difference in our overall percentage of attendance. Now, we had one school, but it's one of our smaller schools. So when students miss a day or have a batch of absences in a smaller setting, there's more of an impact on the attendance percentage. But in terms of how we compare to last year, we actually kind of have some schools that are up in attendance, and we have some who have dropped, where you see some of the negative signs there. And so each school, again, is using their teams to reach out and engage students so that they can continue to recruit students back to regular engagement and attendance. The academic piece, so based on how students have been engaging in their learning, we have had a number of schools requesting for small groups to be served on campus. And Hayes had started out earlier this school year, and they have approximately 50 students who are accessing learning at various times throughout the week. So you can have up to 20, 25 students attending in one day based on their schedule and their needs. And the remainder of the school around October 21st brought in smaller groups of students. So we have around 260 students, in addition to those students who were served with IEPs that we've been serving, many since the summer and also since the beginning of the year. But now we've identified some of those students using the processes we've mentioned before to bring on campus for more focused attention and in-person learning. And so on some campuses, that's happening on Wednesdays, and some that's happening 2 days a week. It's based on student need. And in terms of our social emotional work, again, Hayes has kind of led the way with their small groups on campus, their social emotional check-in that they do on a daily basis with students to monitor where they are, and their ADVO classes that provide more intentional, direct support. So a couple highlights about our secondary piece. I don't know if you were able to see the feature in the Camas Washougal Record with our PBL campus and just the PPE they've been able to provide, and just with, you know, our instructors and our students over there just doing some amazing work. Then CHS actually had a community connection day to, again, address some of the social emotional learning pieces, just giving people screen time breaks. Like, you know, let's just shut down our screens for a day. I think last Wednesday, the 18th, and teachers hopped on the emails or Zooms or phone calls and reached out to students who they were concerned about. And staff conducted home visits and did those kinds of things to just try to respond to some of the needs that we heard around, you know, students feeling overwhelmed or disengaged and those kinds of things. And this year, you know, with our academic piece, middle schools are doing their first round of proficiency-based scoring. So reporting for middle school is going to look a little different. We're not going to have the usual A through F, but as you've seen before in previous presentations, especially from our PBL campus, that is now spreading across our middle schools, and teachers are becoming accustomed, as well as our parents, to this new grading. And so we'll have a little bit more information in December about how our middle schools are doing with proficiency-based scoring. So that's what we have for you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
If I'm understanding the attendance correctly, we're talking about the difference between September to today and some of these secondary schools, and we're talking all three of our high schools, all three of our middle schools.
Yes.
Some attendance was down 2%. And you're saying like maybe that attendance down 16% is maybe that's reflective of a smaller population school. And so just a few absences look bigger.
Yes,
in
that's,
comparison.
yeah. Yes.
So
And
that
we can
16
give
down
you this.
16% isn't Camas High School, is what
No,
we're
it's
saying.
not.
Okay.
No, it's not. And if you would like the specific attendance per school per year where these reports were extracted from, I'm happy to have those sent to you as well. It's just a lot of information to put in one slide to try to give you just a little quick update. So,
And I guess I think we appreciate seeing the numbers and then wonder, okay, then so what happens when we see this you know, attendance is down, what's the next step then? Or attendance
right.
is up, where do they go with this great data?
Yes, they go straight back to those student engagement teams. So the students that have dropped in attendance, you know, that team pulls their names for the report, and then they begin their process in determining who needs to be called in, who needs what support, that kind of thing. So they keep the machine going, trying to reach out to those students.
Dr. Williams, I was just going to comment. I know often the way we track kids in secondary is, you know, behavior, academics. What was it? We always pull a bag report. Behavior, attendance, and grades. And I'm so happy to see on here that we have social emotional learning too, because given this remote learning that we're in right now, I know that there are a lot of students being impacted and traumatized just by what's going on in the world. And I'm really glad we're paying attention to that SEL. And I know the challenge is finding where those kids are so that we can scoop them up and either bring them in or figure out how best we can serve them. So I really appreciate that that is one of the metrics we're using.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's super important. And like I mentioned Hayes earlier, some of the work that they are doing and discovering in terms of trying to reach out to some of their students and where they're gaining traction. We actually brought in some of the Hayes staff to our secondary in-person learning committee to learn from what they've gained in this short amount of time. And it's just really powerful when you are intentional and attend to those needs. And so we're hoping to continue to see, hopefully more and more students improve.
Mhm. Awesome. And I would think that if there are any parents or guardians out there who have kids that you're worried about with social emotional, that we should have them reach out to their student's school counselor.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that update.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Williams. So as you guys mentioned in the board communication, we did have a town hall last Monday. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of that. I know that you guys attended as well. In order to run these town halls, we've tried to use kind of a 3-step process. The first one is that we put out to the community an open-ended question that starts a conversation through thought exchange. And then we close that a day or two before the town hall. We go through and read all the thoughts and theme those thoughts and pull out the top thoughts and really try to plan the content of the town hall based on what people are wondering or where the energy is in the conversation. And so this is linked here, so everybody has access to all the thoughts and how we organized it. You can drill down as deep as you would like. And these were pushed out through Parent Square, and then they're also on our reopening pages on the district website. So people can really explore as much as they want. This was the word cloud from that initial conversation, really just trying to understand where the community was at. You can see words that probably aren't going to surprise you about these decisions that everybody's trying to make on behalf of the students that we serve and the staff that we support. Then what happens is, in addition to the word cloud and the theming, you just get the top ranked thoughts as well. And you see here that there's 646 thoughts were in this conversation. And then people rate the thoughts. And then the higher the rating, the thoughts move up. And so you're kind of able to see where there's some agreement in the community, or at least where people have prioritized parts of the conversation. And the thing that was really just, these are really challenging times. And I recognize that people have a lot of different perspectives on how we should be navigating this. But what I thought that was really awesome about our community is no matter what side you're on of this and trying to figure out what's going to best work for your family, there was just a general consensus on how amazing our staff have been. And so I'm always a little nervous going into analyzing these thoughts because it's just open-ended and people can say whatever they want. And, I accept the criticism as it comes. But you just do have to kind of mentally prepare yourself to get ready to receive that feedback. And then to see this, just knowing how hard our staff has worked and we're continuing to work, really filled me with a lot of joy. And I was really happy to pass this along to staff because they're giving their best in really challenging times. And our job is to help keep framing the conditions so that they can continue to deliver. And those are hard decisions that you guys are charged with as well. The other part of the exchange then, or the process, is we do the exchange before to prep us and to hopefully have content that's aligned to the needs of the community. And then we do some presenting during the town hall. And then I have a group of district staff, our cabinet, that monitors the Q&A and tries to respond to everybody real time. And then at the end of the presentation, the last 20 minutes, we do another exchange live. And we just ask what's on your mind. What questions do you still have? What are your thoughts about next steps? And these were the top thoughts from that participation. Now you can see the number of, we only had 56 thoughts in this because it was a 20-minute conversation. But again, people appreciate the path that you've navigated to date. I think there's general consensus that people want kids in school, but they want them in school safely. and trying to figure that out. There's also a realization that there's not just an easy answer to that. And so really appreciate our community stepping up and engaging in this. And so now I'll pause and see if you have any questions about the town hall before we get into the transition to increasing in-person experience. Okay. So these slides, you know, I've been given these now since August, I think. So I just keep updating them. The first part is I just kind of want to, I do this at the town hall too, is I go back to the principles that you guys helped establish when we did our original planning. I think it's important to keep revisiting these as we navigate the future. You know, what was important to us? Is that still important to us? How do we plan accordingly? So flexibility, minimizing risk, relationships, making sure that we recognize that there are some real vulnerable students, families, and staff members. How do we keep an equity focus? Anytime we are able to be live or in person is like golden, and we want to maximize that. We are partnering with families in new ways. Like this is different, right? And so we really want to maximize those opportunities and build on those. And then just always learning as we go, right? So I shared the Pear Deck with you guys earlier. There's new applications, there's new ways of doing things. Like we need to listen to students, staff, and families so that we can apply the lessons learned. We talked to you in the last town hall just about some givens that we have, you know, that we love our students. I haven't met anybody that says that they don't like our students, right? They want the best for them. It's just how is the part that's interesting. And that we are respecting that this is pretty, you know, we're in a pandemic. And so we acknowledge that. The direction that you've given me to continue to work with our public health partners, and Tracy, you articulated that in the board communication tonight. Again, we are pushing, right? We're trying to be methodical and cautious, but as I show later, our in-person learning experiences are growing each month. And it's difficult with what's going on in the community. But so far we haven't had transmissions at our school sites, but we are having more staff and students that are affected because of what's happening in the community. Just a recognition of our staff. Also, you know, I think it's important, and I think the comments from Ms. Ali tonight in the public comment, that kids are learning in their learning community, they're learning persistence, they're learning innovation. Is it what we want in terms of the ideal setting? No, but this is an opportunity for us to really build skill sets of our students. I know our skill set of our staff has increased exponentially given from where we were back in March. So learning community persistence and innovation are happening. And the other brutal reality is more people are getting sick. And not just in our community, but in our state and country and the world. So good news. I'm going to share with you guys some research, as I always do, kind of the updates to our annotated bibliography. That transmission still, it doesn't look as risky as was originally thought back in March in the summer. That now that we've had kids in person, even our own experiences here in Camas, we're not seeing transmission happen at school. The bad news is that the issues that we are seeing in schools, and we're seeing more of them, are a result of transmission in the community. And so I'll show you our data dashboard here in a minute, but that's a problem that we haven't experienced yet, where we've had to shut down classrooms or schools or programs because of the lack of staff. But other districts and other regions are experiencing that now, where when you have so many people in quarantine, you're not able to provide the services that you want. So those are kind of, it's the yin and the yang right now. And then I just pulled, again, this challenge that everyone's facing. And this was a quote in the USA Today article, and I don't cite USA Today in our bibliography, but it is just, everybody's split still, but we're getting more and more information. And so I'm going to share more of the information that we've been getting. So right now, here's where we're at, our COVID dashboard. You know, the last couple of meetings, we had 1 or 2, and now you can see that cumulatively that we've had 8 staff positive cases in our district and 1 student positive case in our district. We've had a lot of students and staff quarantined or isolated, and that data is all in here. Unfortunately, in the community right now, the contact tracing from public health is starting to get overwhelmed because of the volume here. And so that's why it's really important that we've invested in our processes internally so that when we do have a case that we are able to respond really rapidly, initiate our protocols, communicate first any close contacts and then the larger community. As I mentioned before, no transmissions at school to date. And so we're glad about that. I feel like it's probably inevitable that at some point, if the community spread continues to escalate like this, it's really hard to keep that out of our schools. And so this is the reality that we face. Just to give you some context, I just pulled this from New York Times on Friday. This is like a heat map of where we're at. Relatively speaking, the whole country looks to be a little hot. But in our area of Washington, you can see that our colors are a little softer, which is good news, but not such that our governor didn't put the restrictions into place. I wanted to pull just, I've been trying to give context too as we navigate this, because I know it feels like it's all very personal to me sometimes, like I'm just living this pandemic, right? I'm trying to navigate it. It's all I can think about and it's all happening here to me, but it's happening everywhere. And everybody is having kind of a unique approach to it. And I've been paying attention to Rhode Island. One, they're small, so it's interesting to just see how they navigate. When you look at Rhode Island on this map, their cases per 100,000 daily is about 83 per 100,000. For context, we're 30 per 100,000. So that's almost 3 times as much. Their state has approached it a little differently. They put in the restrictions as well, similar timeline to what we have in place in Washington. But notice what's staying open in Rhode Island, in person and K-8. And notice what's closed in Rhode Island. So it's just an interesting, context, right or wrong. I don't know, how do you navigate? Nobody knows. They're trying to do the best they can. But I've been trying to really look out across other constituencies, I guess, who are trying to do the same problem that we are. The other thing that Rhode Island does that I think is really pretty cool is they have a designated K-12 testing system for Rhode Island. So if you're a K-12 student or staff member, you can get tested. You don't have to have a provider. You can just go call the hotline, schedule an appointment. We don't have that infrastructure right now in Washington. And I recognize the scale is quite different, but that could be something moving forward that our state may invest in. And I send this information. When I do this research, I don't just send it to you. I send it to all of my contacts. And so I send it to the governor's office. I send it to the Department of Health. I send it to anybody that potentially will listen. And I just ask questions, right, about priorities and how we might navigate this moving forward. So I always try to give you new research each time, and these are added into the annotated bibliography that everybody has access to on our website. So the research that I got this time came from actually one of our parents shared the press conference with me, and CDC had a press conference, the National Task Force. And the research that they cited, and I'll share a quote from them. I kind of like, anytime somebody says the data, I always try to track down what's the data, right? Where's the report that they're getting it from? And so one of the data sources was from UNICEF, and they just recently published an article averting a lost COVID generation. These are some of the high points that, as I reviewed it, that you're going to see some consistent themes with the research that I showed with you last time. That children are still getting it. They tend to have milder cases, but there are severe cases and deaths have happened. Children in schools are not the main drivers. And so we're seeing that consistently in the literature, that they tend to represent the community as a whole. And that mental health, what you just asked about, Connie, and to your point around SEL and our monitoring, that the longer kids are away from a community, even though we're doing our best to try to develop that community, it is different, and it can be very stressful and anxiety causing. The next batch that I found was from a research that looked at countries just over the 7-month period and how they've handled not just the first wave, but second and third wave. And so this one, they explored 4 different myths and then kind of tried to either prove or debunk the myth based on their research. So you can see similar trends here that are going on across the world. And then the last one was a United Nations University report. This was also kind of a thread to the CDC release. Again, transmissions are driven through home exposures. So they have to get somebody has to get the COVID somewhere, right? And then it's spreading within the home. And schools have not driven those community transmissions from the data that they shared. Child-to-child transmissions are uncommon, and children in school settings are not the primary drivers of transmission to adults. That's an important research point because I know that we've really tried to be thoughtful about staff safety, that this is scary, right? And we want to make sure that people feel supported. And so looking at how do we make sure our staff are safe in the school setting when they're working with students. And then again, the negative aspects of students not being in school, they cite that. So where we're at right now, we're in this high transmission rate of over 200. I think, Erica, you mentioned before that we saw the highest growth that we've ever seen in 1 week. Our percentage of positive tests, I believe, is still in this range. It's harder to find that data point as easily as the cases per 100,000 per 14 days. And then, as I mentioned before, until we bring 50% of our students back on campus, it's really hard to say that we're implementing our processes consistently. And we're built for 7,000 students, and we're roughly serving maybe 1,500 of those students in person. And so I'm confident that our staff are taking this seriously and doing a good job, but every day is a learning experience with that. WIA are the agency that moderates athletics and activities in our state, did just do an adjustment to the season calendar again. So I'm just calling that to your attention. They've grouped the sports into high, moderate, or low risk. Right now, we are currently still having high school sports in very small groups, 6 or less. Right now, we're serving about 250 students per week through that. And coaches are doing a great job. Rory is making sure that we're following the guidelines and being really strict around those. We don't want to have a lapse that causes us to have an outbreak and not be able to provide these kinds of opportunities. We did suspend indoor activities per WIAA with the spikes. That was a recommendation, but we're continuing those outside activities. And on a day like this, it was a pretty nice day to be outside. So last week, you guys gave me the direction to go ahead and pause in any of our plans to move to hybrid or adding small groups because of where we were at in the community and these accelerating rates. And so we have just been kind of holding serve and just continuing to serve the students that we have on campus and looking to January to potentially move towards hybrid. This is where we're at currently with small groups. So we started in the summer with about 200 students. In September, we moved to 300. October, we moved to 700. Dr. Williams updated you on some of those kinds of activities. And and now in kindergarten, with those groups coming in, we're at about 1,400 students served on a weekly basis. Now that could be one day, multiple days. It's just kids getting an in-person learning experience. And so we've just been incrementally moving up, and we want to continue to build on that. But given that the timing of the calendar and what was happening with the rates, we're pausing until after winter break. So this was the press conference that I referenced that a parent shared with me. I really appreciate her. She does great research, and I feel like we're research partners sometimes. But they basically, just said that schools could be the safest place for our kids during the pandemic. It's because of those protocols that schools are putting into place. The quote was, "There's extensive data that confirms that K-12 schools can operate with face-to-face learning, and they can do it safely and they can do it responsibly." Now, anytime I see that extensive data, that's why I want to explore it. Like I'm looking for that national database, right, to really help guide me. It turns out, at least from what I could tell in my humble search, that the extensive data relies on what I cited earlier today, and also relies on Oster's data dashboard that I previously cited with you. Now, the challenge of Oster's data dashboard is that is just self-reported data. And so we have signed up to report our data to that. We do it at a state level. So it doesn't say Camas School District, it just says a district in Washington State. But we don't have to do that. No other district has to do that. I just feel like a responsibility to do that to help us as a country make better decisions around this. So we're only as good as the data that they're getting there. So there's a lot still to be worked through. So tonight I would love to get your feedback on a few things. One is we have been hearing that the Washington Department of Health will be updating their K-12 decision tree. We saw that Oregon did that at the end of October, and they relaxed some of the guidelines based on the learning that we've had that the problem is the disease in the community. The problem isn't transmission in school. But they're not exclusive from each other, right? If you get disease in your community, you're gonna have disease in the school. You're gonna have to deal with that. So do we as a district just wait until that decision tree is updated and just follow that guidance? Do you as a board want us to start planning for activities in January ahead of that guidance? I can tell you that the 3 weeks before winter break are really important weeks for planning, as I'm sure you guys already know. So that's something that I would love to hear your feedback on. We've announced a delay until post-winter break, and should we make any additional announcements given the current situation? So there are some districts that are announcing like we're not going to do anything until the semester break. The challenge with that is that our elementaries and middle schools aren't on semester break. So I mean, that doesn't make any difference to them. So I hesitate to just tie something to one level of our school district when, we have, 9 other grade levels that are impacted. So that's a decision point that I would love to hear from you. And then, when we think about what we've done so far, and you saw that progress of 3%, 4%, 6%, 10%, 20%, what do you want that to look like in the future? Right? Do you want us to continue to build on that in a cautious, incremental manner? And if so, what should we be thinking about with that? So those are 3 big questions. I expect you to have all the answers crystal clear, really easy, because this is also clear and easy. But it just help us as staff to understand kind of where you're at with this. And you certainly can ask more questions of me as well.
I'll start. One quick question. You said if we take a pause till semester 1 ends, which is end of January, but that doesn't align to the other schools in the district. Is there a date that'll, I would guess there's not a date that aligns all across 13 grade levels.
No, there is not. There's our elementaries are just going to be finishing up their first trimester soon. So they'll be kind of mid-trimester, as will middle schools be mid-trimester when we start back after winter break.
My thoughts are that, semesters are really important in the secondary setting because those are the grades that go on the transcript. And, if we're going to make a connection, it seems like that would be a good delineation. I would say personally, given what I've seen on the news of how many people are traveling for Thanksgiving and what's going on, my guess is we're going to see a spike in the middle of December and then Christmas spike, New Year's Eve spike. And so it's going to be, I would be surprised if we see a decrease before at least mid-January. And so being able to put a stake in the sand and say we are on hold until this date where, would be the first time I think that we might likely see a decrease if one's coming soon, makes sense so that we can settle into remote learning and just do that really well right now without staff thinking, okay, is it going to be in 3 weeks that we start? Is it, and just settle in and I think we can make reasonable projections of what the rates of the virus are going to be between now and mid-January. If where we are right now and what's ahead of us is any indicator.
I agree, as I already had given my opinions and thoughts on this, but I also don't think that there needs to be one line in the sand. When there's many different beaches, we can do a couple of different lines in the sands, just so we can be accommodating to that planning and that mindset.
I would agree with a couple lines in the sand. I don't know how that would work, but you know, it would be difficult to send the high schools back if it's not semester break. So I don't know if you can tell them it's semester break, but those K through 5, it doesn't affect them if they go in at semester break or not. You know, they can go back to in-person learning as soon as it's safe to do so. And it may not be safe to do so until semester break, but those, in my mind, I'm answering another question here, are some of the first ones that we're going to start sending back as the younger ones who are going to start going back first. So it's probably known that the high schoolers will not go back before semester break, but potentially the younger ones could. And if the decision tree gets updated, we keep hearing about that. And I feel like we've been hearing about that forever, and not really forever, but it was mentioned at our WASDA meeting. And so they have to be thinking about it and they have to get it out. And I don't know if that means they'll get it out over Christmas break or not. And the new rates that they come up with might still mean that we can't do hybrid in-person learning, but at least we will have a different target to potentially get to and get some of the younger kids back.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, I agree with what Connie was saying about the semester break for secondary. I think that makes sense, because I think any sort of transition or disruption to what we're already doing there's naturally going to be some discomfort and trauma along with that. And I just think that trying to settle into a new routine when we're coming up on that point when, like Connie was saying, grades, you know, the grades matter, that's going to go on the transcript. I feel confident at the very least, if I had to make a decision right now, I feel confident at the very least saying secondary delay until end of first semester. I echo exactly what Tracy just said there. That decision tree, we just keep hearing more and more about it, and I just feel like it's our responsibility to go off of the best information we have as board members and as representatives of the public. It's our responsibility to go off of what the experts in our field are recommending, and if that's what Department of Health is recommending right now, then I hate to make these decisions about things like risk management and insurance and all of that, but it's a very, that is a very real thing that we need to consider as board members as well, is the liability we open ourselves up to if we go against recommendations there. So well, I hope that the Department of Health and everybody involved with that at the state level, if they really are going to update it, they get that to us, but I feel like we need to go off of the best information that we've got right now.
If I can just throw one more thing back out there, is another word that came up at our WASDA a lot, and we talk about often, is relationships. And so how much I appreciate the relationship that we have with Clark County Public Health and that Jeff has with all the other school superintendents in the area, because that is helping us also, and helping us learn what they're doing and help understand Dr. Melnick and the rest down there, and why they're making their decisions and how we can get students back in, but still use their guidelines and not be at risk.
And Corey, I think that's a good point that you made, that, while we don't want to make decisions just about liability, it's the financial health of our district that we're talking about. If we don't pay attention to that, then we could jeopardize the entire district. And so it is something that we need to factor into the decisions. And, as Jeff points out frequently, we are not experts in the field of epidemiology or public health. And so relying on our experts is really important, and deviating outside that bounds really puts the district at risk, as you said. So it's something that as much as we want to say we don't have to take that into consideration, we do have to take it into consideration.
When you guys consider the current guidelines, younger students is one of the things that we could expand our small groups with. And then the other way that we're qualifying students is, as you heard Dr. Williams, students based on their need. And so I'm assuming that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if the rates weren't skyrocketing right now, but we were still in high, that you would have an expectation of me to start thinking about first grade, or start coming to you with an idea of another group. But because of the rates, we've paused. And so that basically how I'm interpreting right now, your direction is that I should start planning for small groups. And if the rates are coming back to some sort of a status that is either within the guidelines or the new guidelines or something, that you would want us to be ready to implement that sooner than later, and that thinking about high school in particular at a semester break would make sense. Is that accurate, what I'm hearing from you guys?
Thank
Okay.
you. Encapsulated it 100%. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's helpful for us from a staff planning point. So probably based on this conversation today, we'll communicate about semester break for our high school students, and then looking at whatever guidance, whatever happens with the rates, and really trying to position ourselves for a launch in January. The other thing I think that's important is there is some good news. So in my conversation with Dr. Melnick today, we had it on Monday instead of Wednesday because of Thanksgiving break. The rates are not good. Cowlitz County is jumping up really quickly. They have a smaller population, so the cases really affect them. They have larger swings than Clark County. But what is good news is the vaccination. And so now we're starting to talk about the next layer of who gets the vaccination, how does that happen, which is a whole nother layer of this thing. But in looking at the draft plans for the state, they have to submit them to the federal government. Our staff, our K-12 staff, are at the top of phase 2. So phase 1 is your first responders, your healthcare workers, like if you're working in an extended care facility, those kinds of where you're caring for COVID patients. And then K-12 is that next phase. So, it's possible that will start to come into play. And then we will either have to be making decisions on our own about what does that look like for our district, how do we handle immunizations, and or we'll get guidance from the state around that. Is this an immunization that will be required for the next school year? And that we have people that are opposed to vaccinations. And so there's another whole layer of this that we'll have to start to navigate, but I'm very grateful that we'll have to start to navigate that. One thing that I think is really important as we think about this year, and if let's say that nothing changed other than we've settled into a norm of being in high COVID activity level, I think it's critical that for any kid that wants an opportunity to come onto our campus, that we figure out a way for them to come onto our campus. And it might look very different, but if we think about going March 2020 to June 2021, and some of our kids not getting an experience with our amazing staff in person, I just feel like that's unacceptable. And I understand all the constraints, and I don't want to violate any of the safety or anything or put anybody in harm's way. But based on what we've done so far, when you look at all those interactions of 20% of our staff and of our students have had that experience, and there's a percent, maybe 20% or so that don't want an experience on campus, great. But there's then 60% that haven't had an opportunity yet and deserve an opportunity at some point. And so even if that means that we have to change and we have groups of high school kids in by 4 or whatever that looks like, I feel like that's a responsibility that I need to work towards. And you can tell me to push the brakes or we can push the accelerator or whatever it is. But just know that I really believe that our schools in Camas have drawn a lot of people here because of the experiences that we've been able to provide through the years. And at some point during this school year, each of our kids needs to benefit from that. And so that's at least how I'm pursuing the planning. And I know that there's a lot of work to do through that. This is our last slide. You know, there has been a new proclamation, a travel advisory in place, self-quarantining. These are all, they're all just recommendations though. And so I think one thing that we're really trying to help support our staff is encourage the public that if you do have to do essential travel, that you do quarantine and that you do take seriously these precautions, because our staff are putting it all out there for everybody. And we want to make sure that they're as safe as possible. So that is the end of a very long superintendent report tonight. President Hennessy, I really appreciate the conversation that you guys had with me tonight in the discussion. And if there are any other questions or comments before I yield back to you, Connie.
Anyone? I just wanted to quickly, what I heard you saying was that you're going to look for opportunities for students to have some kind of in-building experience, which is different than coming back to school in a hybrid model. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that, you know, if the guidance allows us to bring kids back in hybrid or full person, then absolutely, like, we follow that guidance. If not, and we're only allowed small groups, at some point you could make the argument that every one of those 60% of those kids is in need of an experience, right? And so how that looks, you know, I don't know, but I know we have really talented people that could figure out a way that each student would be able to benefit from some sort of in-person experience. And over the course between now and June, I think that we should be able to deliver that for everyone.
We heard at WASDA, I think it was it Orcas Island that was able to send their kids to Camp Orkilla? So the kids could they were like an outdoor school type of thing. So they were outside, and it was exactly that, an opportunity for kids to get together, you know, come and do, you know, they sort of mapped the curriculum to go with, you know, being in the outdoors, and just figured out a safe way to provide those connections for kids. And so they're lucky to have that in their backyard. But yeah, I think we can get creative.
And that's something too, is you guys as a board, ultimately, you know, you set that course. I'm just sharing that, you know, from my perspective, I think that would be an important thing to be able to deliver for our kids at some point this year. So, and again, safely, creatively, but figure out how to make those memories, you know, like we've had enough COVID screen memories for sure. I think everybody's filled their bucket with that. And so how can we be creative to make some other kinds of memories that will last? So.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that report. That moves us on to our monthly budget report, and Mr. McEachran, we're all yours.
Good evening, school board members. Before I forget, have a happy Thanksgiving. This meeting here, I wanted to talk a little bit about budget status report real briefly, just for the 2 months of the year, give you a quick enrollment update, and then kind of more of a perspective look ahead financially for this year. Where does it kind of look like we're going to land given what we know today? And then we have one final piece of business with the replacement levies. School board needs to appoint some committee members, so for pro-con committee. So, and I kind of want to give you a briefing about that process. So, looking at the budget status reports, we're trying to make these things like valuable, and I'll be honest, this is a tough one, right? It's just we're trying to convey information, but the format of them is tough. So I'm gonna kind of roll through it pretty fast. You've heard me talk about, obviously local receipting is going to be down when we start remote. We've talked about the enrollment loss and that, that'll have some effects. So none of this is really, I think, out of what we have expected up to this point. as you might expect, of course, ASB is going to be really limited in activity, but business is basically as usual for capital projects, paying our debt service, transportation vehicle fund, all those funds click along as normal. As with maybe there's some delays due to COVID with capital projects or what have you, but for the most part, Heidi's been moving forward with that, obviously. So one of the tools that we've been trying to kind of introduce, and you've kind of seen this before, is actually I need to do this. Probably make it a little bigger. Sorry about that. I should have started in this format. Is to use some Forecast 5 analytic dashboards. And so this is one, we've shared it before. And kind of the point of this is to kind of say, okay, here's our revenues, for the month of October or year to date through October. How does that compare in years past? And you can kind of see this fluctuation. This is really caused by the McCleary changes in our funding model. It's changed our cash flow for the year. That's what's kind of caused a lot of this volatility right here. Then also kind of what you want to focus on when you're reading kind of anything from Forecast 5, to use this term favorable, either unfavorable or it's favorable. I would not use that term personally, but this is kind of part of the coding of what's in these reports. So basically, it's going to be unfavorable if your revenues are less than what you expected. It's going to be favorable if your expenditures are less, though. So that's how they use that terminology. So on the expenditure side, you can kind of see we've been, typically we kind of click along a little bit more than the previous year, and that's different this year, and that's to be expected, right? Because in a remote setting, we're not transporting kids, right? There's things that we're not providing. We're not providing the same level of food service, and so all that kind of has an effect. So in kind of reducing our expenditures. So before I move on, I want to just pause right there, see if there's any questions about these reports. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or is this valuable information? Because we're still trying to feed you what, as a school board, hopefully you find, interesting is a strong word, useful. How about that? Okay. So enrollment, I'm going to jump to that.
Just really quickly, Jason.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I feel like this is all really valuable. And what's particularly difficult right now is being able to kind of flesh out what is a response to as a result of remote learning and COVID, and what is, what we're experiencing, the progression of the McCleary decision rippling out over time. And so, it would be good, to see, some of this we expected because of McCleary. And so just being able to identify those two causes would be helpful.
Yeah, I think those are two very monumental things to what would normally be a pretty stable system, right? Changing the funding model and then a pandemic. So this is going to have some ripple effects for many years. This is not just 1 year and hey, it's over, we got a vaccine and we move on. We're still trying to, we still hadn't settled from the McCleary changes, and now we have the pandemic, and so it's going to take a while. So we'll try to kind of ferret that out for you. And try and delineate, okay, this is McCleary driven or this is, pandemic driven, as we kind of go along.
So Jason, I'm sorry. So just to make sure I'm reading this right. So with our year-to-date expenses and the salary and benefits, so we are coming in under where we expected to be year to date when we made the budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, on the salary side, yes. Benefits, okay. Not.
Oh,
And you can kind of see, I know this is very small print, but basically our salary expenses are down, but our benefit costs are actually up from last year. And the
so
reason
what causes
for
that?
normally they kind of follow one another, but the reason for that is SEB. This is the first year that we have SEB for the entire year. And so when we converted over to the new state benefits program, it's increased our costs for providing benefits to our employees. Now, more employees have benefits, so that, mission accomplished on the state's part. We're also seeing an uptick in our unemployment benefit costs, obviously. So that's a cause and effect. So when you furlough employees, they're also entitled to unemployment benefits, and that then triggers, additional costs for us as well. So those two things have kind of kept the benefits line item kind of afloat, or actually increasing over last year, where at the same time, while salaries have been decreasing.
So we're funding benefits then some out of local money then. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have to.
Yeah.
So the state did not fully fund us for for all of the positions that we have, or for benefits, and all employees have the same benefit package, right? So even for federal programs that are fully federally funded, those programs didn't see more revenues, but they still have to provide the same level of benefits, right? So, there has to be some local money to help fill that gap. And so,
okay, thank you.
Okay. So on the enrollment side, we've talked about this, been giving you the play-by-play. So in September, we were down probably about 3.5%. In October, we were down about 4.5%, and now we're down about 5.9%. And so kind of for the year, that puts us down, quite a bit. And so we're hoping that trend will turn, as we have more in-person educational experiences, that we'll start to see, kids come back into our system. So, but on the basic ed side, at least, that's that impact. And that's why we're expecting, lower apportionment dollars this year. Running starts, pretty much on par. CTE, pretty much on par, as well as the other categories that I, typically highlight in special ed and bilingual. These are kind of the key funding drivers for us. We pay pretty close attention to these throughout the year. So, so what this kind of, there's been a lot of talk, I think, or questions, I think, of where are our kids going, right? So I thought I'd provide you a pie chart here. So about 35% have opted for homeschool, and this is the information that are provided by parents. It's voluntary, it's not required. So that's why there's this unknown piece to the pie of 13%. We just don't have the information. But for those parents that chose to share what their plans were, this is what this pie chart represents. So quite a few to homeschool, uptick in private, right? And then quite a few going out of state, right? 16%, that's quite a few. So those are kind of the three big categories. I also did kind of, while I was doing this analysis, I kind of wanted to know, okay, are we losing some kids to, other public schools within Clark County, to potentially our neighbors? And how many were we losing to kind of still they're in state, but they're, in other parts of the state other than Clark County? So a little bit there. There's obviously the online school, 5%. So so it's interesting. It's interesting demographic information. And so I was running this from August 1st through First part of November is when I ran the report. So any questions on that?
I have a quick one. So out of just out of curiosity, what about our kindergarten enrollment? And how do we know how many parents chose to not enroll their children this year and are going to next year? And is that included? Well, it's probably not because they didn't pull their student. They just never chose to put them in this year. So I don't know how we get that number if it's possible.
I don't think I don't think I have that information, Tracy, because they do have to be, enrolled at least at some point.
Right. And it's probably a tough number to get, but I don't even know if, what is our kindergarten enrollment this year versus last year, just out of curious. And I'm not asking for it right now. It's just something I'm thinking about.
Yeah. So we had been right around 450 kindergartners previous to the pandemic. And then what we typically see is those classes get bigger over time, right? So we're graduating 600, but we're starting with a kindergarten class of 450, right? That dropped to about, I want to say 430 last year. And it kind of changed throughout the year a little bit. We had some infusion of some new students throughout the year. And then this year, I think, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I know that we're down. It wasn't as bad as many other districts, I will say. We actually held on to probably the highest percentage of kindergartners of any other school that I know of, at least in this region. So, that's good. Maybe we won't see quite as big a bubble next year.
So Jason, this pie chart, it triggers two questions in me. So first, this is a decrease, or this is 481 withdrawals from August 1st to November 9th. Do we have any data in terms of the withdrawals from August 1st to November 9th of last year? Like, how does this compare? Because I'm assuming even in a good year, we have students withdraw. So I'm just wondering, how off some of these are compared to previous years, if we have that data at all.
Yeah, I did compare that. And, this same time period last year, we were at about 155 students that had withdrawn. Some of the reasons fluctuated, obviously, circumstances for families are considerably different this year than last. And so some of the reasons were a little bit different, right? And I would say that's probably about normal. We lose some kids and we gain some kids at the beginning of the year. That's pretty normal. And actually throughout the summer, actually as well too. But in this case, I really kind of focused the time frame just on that August through the first part of November time frame, because that was kind of where, families needed to make a lot of decisions in the month of August. And that's when the activity was pretty high with our registrar's office.
And then just maybe I'm grasping for things here, but have we had many enrollments? I mean, because this is just people coming out. Have we had anybody, starting, moving into the district or starting up services with us?
Some movement, not a lot.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at kind of where we thought we would be, we're about 424 kids under budget, right? So, this pie chart represents 481. Sorry, we're saving money with energy here. Let me turn that back on. But, sometimes we tread water, I would say through the summer, with families moving in and out, right? So if a family moves out, that's a house that's vacant. And with the housing market pretty hot, people are moving back in, so that's good. I wouldn't say that we're not gaining ground. We lost another 35 kids since last month. So
Jason,
hopefully that changes with the new calendar year.
Yeah, I have two questions as well. On that, the one portion of the pie that it says out of state, are these more likely families who have moved to other states, or are these kids going across the river to Portland?
It would include both, out of state, I didn't try
Yeah.
to go with a greater Portland
Yeah.
metropolitan area, if you will. But I mean, a
Trying to-
lot to Florida, Idaho,
Yeah.
Texas, you name it.
So people have just moved.
Yeah.
And then the second question I have is just it's not even really a question, it's more of a comment. So if we've got 35% of these 481 homeschooled,
Mhm.
that's a way higher percentage than we usually have leave to go homeschool. So my guess is they are doing this in lieu of remote learning and screen time. And when we go back to school, I'm guessing we will get a large percentage of those kids back. And I know that especially at the high school level, in my day job, there's work that goes on in evaluating transcripts and works done by kids who are homeschooled and coming back. And so just sort of a heads up to our system that we'll need to be reprocessing these kids back in and just being prepared for that. I'm not sure at the younger grades whether that is as big of a process, but just something that we'll want to prepare for. I'm sure it's already been thought of and planned, but my wheels are spinning.
Yeah, actually, I just spoke with one of our elementary principals just on Friday and was kind of talking about that very thing. And her feedback was, yeah, I have a lot of parents who've just said, I can't do remote. I'm going to do homeschool, but just open those doors and I'll be back. So,
Right.
so it sounds, we've been trying to stay in connection, in contact with some of those families, even though we may not be, serving those students. So they're still within our community, right?
Of course.
We're still the Camas community. And so we'll still serve them when we open those doors and welcome them back. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
So looking ahead, there's a lot of information on this slide here, but kind of the takeaway is, our revenues, we can tell kind of net, we're going to be down about $6.4 million right now. That's my best estimate right now. I'm pretty solid on the levy and apportionment forecast. So, losing about, 5 million in apportionment, that's student driven, right? So we know our enrollment numbers now, we can pretty well figure that out. And levies, we've gone through the process of certifying that and what have you, and we're getting assessed values from, the county. That's all firming up, right? The local non-tax is a little bit more of a wild card. I've obviously, I'm factoring in a pretty sizable revenue loss for, some of those programs. But we're only 2 months into the year, right? So just take it a little bit with a grain of salt that could certainly change, of 2.7 million revenue loss there. On the expenditure side, this one's definitely a wild card because we know September and October are really not representative at all of normal, right? We built a budget around normal. We know that we've, overall we're, about 7.4% less in those first 2 months, but we know that it's not going to stay that way, because the more kids that you bring back onto campus, the more expenses it will incur, right? And so we know it's going to change. We know it's going to ramp up. So I give that some, just know that, right? That I don't even want to say 1.3 million year to date below projected. Some of those expenditures could actually come back. So an example might be, say a coaching contract, right? As long as, we're not playing sports, some of those contracts are deferred, but sports come back into play and clubs, those expenses will just kind of be deferred until later in the year. So even some of this 1.3 could really come back and we may end up paying it before the year is out. So just kind of hold on, I think is my ask for the board on expenditures. Just I don't have that good a crystal ball quite yet. So
sorry, when we're talking about some of these things, where do COVID related expenses come in? Like how much are we spending on PPE? Because as we bring students back, we would anticipate that going up. Yes.
So keep in mind, this is a fiscal year. This is fiscal year data, right? And so, which started in September, and this pandemic started in March. So a lot of our PPE purchases, our COVID expenditures were really in last year because we needed to be ready for whatever school was going to be like. And we really didn't know until later in the summer. But due to lead times on PPE, we purchased quite a bit in those months of June and July. So that said, we're just over about $580,000 in COVID expenditures to date. Most of that is in PPE, of course. And then kind of the rest is pretty well evenly split, as far as like some extra work and benefits, technology investments, and some additional curriculum for the remote learning environment. So
Jason, when you say the 500 and some odd thousand for PPE, is that out of this year's budget or last year's budget?
That's mostly last year.
Mostly
so
last year.
580,000 overall, Corey.
Got it. Okay.
The PPE, health and safety supplies is about $250,000, about 250,000. And we had, again, we had pretty well secured all that last year. Just getting ready. So some of these expenditures, trickled into this year, particularly like around, say curriculum, some of those things that we had to kind of pivot pretty fast on towards the end of summer and get prepared for. But the PPE, we had pretty well spent that money earlier in the year. So I mentioned the local non-tax revenue, and I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this particular slide, but sometimes it's easier to talk programs rather than accounting language of local non-tax. What does that mean? Well, there's like tuition and fees, sales of supplies, community ed, community services, and food service revenue. Those are kind of our four main categories for when school is in session normally. You can see right here, this is, north of $3 million in activity that we would normally see. And it's in single digits for the most part with community ed, providing some services to some students, but at a fraction of what it normally is. So this is kind of what we're talking about. So once we get closer back to normal, you'll start to see more activity in food service, start to see community ed. Maybe we get to rent out some of these fields and gyms and facilities again. And, I miss seeing the kids run around out here outside of Zach and on the weekends and the soccer mayhem that happens out there, right? So on the expenditure side, I've pretty well covered all of this. This is just another level of detail. But here's some more detail on that for you. Before I move on, any questions just on the outlook or finances or anything? Okay. I want to talk about the pro-con committees and because this is a new process, right? We've mentioned it before. Last time we went out for a levy 4 years ago. This was not a requirement, but it is now that the school board appoint committee members. And we follow the Clark County, basically jurisdiction election guide that kind of lines out what we're supposed to do as a school district. So after the last meeting, once you folks had approved the resolutions, we had already put a posting in the newspaper, Kansas Washougal Post-Record, and we put on our website a call for volunteers to serve on these two committees. And this meeting really marks kind of the last opportunity for you as a school board to take any action on this before the deadline of December 11th to submit this. So we moved it along as fast as we could, but it was a 2-week period for a call for volunteers. Ultimately, we have a volunteer for the Pro Committee, but we did not have any interest from a citizen to serve on the Con Committee. That doesn't mean that the window is necessarily closed, though. But in looking at past elections, Clark County has sometimes posted or published their own call for volunteers to serve on a committee. And so, if we're approached after tonight, we'll probably have to direct them to the county elections office. But we tried to have kind of a balance, right? We wanted an equal opportunity and published it, but unfortunately, we just didn't get the other side to have a citizen volunteer. So what you'll see before kind of in a few moments in the meeting is you'll be asked to approve basically that list, and there will be one individual on the Pro Committee. And then on the Con, it'll just say on the form that we, after publishing for 2 weeks, a call for volunteers, we had no interested parties. So, we feel like we've done our due diligence there. But I also just wanted you to be aware that it may not, that door is still open potentially. And that's kind of at the county elections discretion, how they manage this. And then I mentioned the deadline of December 11th. So this meeting kind of marks our last opportunity for you as a school board to take action on this. So, because our next meeting is December 13th, 2 days, I think, 2 or 3 days after this deadline. So we're just outside that window. Any questions on that? Okay, good. I'm all done.
I have one quick question. So you say this is our last opportunity to take action on the levy entirely, or just the pro-con appointment?
Just the pro-con appointment, and
Not
I'm
that
just
there's any
saying
action
that
I
there's,
want to take on the levy, but
Yeah.
just clarifying.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jason.
You
Appreciate
bet.
it. All right. And then I think now we actually have to do the appointment of the pro-con committee member. Agenda item.
Yeah, it should be next on the agenda, I think,
Yeah.
Connie.
So I see that there's one person. Let's see, the board must appoint members for the pro-con committees after the board approval of resolution 2005 and 2006. Staff's published the notification. Interested citizens have responded. So I see the member appointment form, and Tammy Herdner Stanley from Camas Quality Citizens for Quality Schools is applying to write the pro statement. And so I'm guessing we just need to have a motion and a second and vote for Tammy to fill that spot.
That's accurate.
I'll make the motion to approve the pro and con committee as presented.
Thanks,
I'll second it.
Thanks, Erica. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It has voted unanimous across all 4 board members. Thank you, Tammy, for volunteering to lead that effort. And with that, we are at the end of our agenda this evening. I wanted to thank you all for your time this evening and for the 22 participants still hanging on there out of a high of 30. I want to thank you, and we are now officially adjourned.